This is a virtual reading of Conspirators, To Each His Own Agenda by Mag Gupta.
Chapter 18. The Prince's Hall. The feast continued, and despite the bad news, it was even more enthusiastic than before. Richard had returned to the banquet table and was leading the song of the wolf of the mountains, the song of a whore who lay with a wolf and created the abomination that was the mountain clan barbarians. It was full of insults and swear words. The hall was filled with raucous laughter by the end of it. Alistair toasted him and laughed with his men. His hall hadn't been this full of merriment in a long time. "Maybe I should procure more daughters to marry off," he said to Faelthor. "I never appreciated how much a royal wedding can warm up a crowd." "Don't let Callisto hear you say that," Faelthor muttered. "But maybe you could convince her and Decimus to divorce and get married again." "Are you mad?" Alistair shook his head. "I will never marry the House of Stewards again. Ignatius has done nothing to help with the preparations." A shrewd look took him over. If only there was some famous general who loved her and who didn't have an arrow in his balls. If only. Faelthor rolled his eyes. This hit him hard. It had been common knowledge that Alistair and Faelthor had wanted to unify their families in marriage. Faelthor was intended for Alistair's oldest daughter, Galeen, but Callisto had quickly laid her claim on him. They had intended to marry within the week, but Faelthor's orders had come through, so they left the marriage until he came back. This he did, but unfortunately, he came back injured. An enemy archer had shot him as he led a charge, and the arrow shaft had broken, all but destroying his testicles and making any sexual practices too painful for him to perform. It had left him impotent and little better than a eunuch, the second lowest in society's levels. Alistair's father declared that they could not marry lest Faelthor's secret come to light. Any marriage between Faelthor and Callisto would be without born children and would be devoid of any marriage activities, and thus doomed to fail. The jagged metal couldn't be removed through medicine without doing more harm, and so Faelthor had painfully learned to live with it, for while the arrowhead could do no further injury, the damage to his marriage plans was done. "You know she still longs for you," Alistair smiled, waking Faelthor from his stupor. "And I her," Faelthor sighed. "Unfortunately, your father had more wisdom than either of us." "Yes, he is wise," Alistair nodded, "even in his insane old age." "He's nearly 100 years old, isn't he?" Mistnir asked. 110, Alistair smiled. "He taught me everything I know about being prince." "Is she as beautiful as I remember?" Faelthor asked. He wasn't listening to the conversation about Alistair's father. "I think so," Alistair smiled in amusement. "She is, without a doubt, the crown jewel of my kingdom, and now I'm just giving her away." Callisto was watching from a balcony above them. She and her handmaiden were hiding behind a curtain, looking at all of the warriors and nobles below them. The handmaiden was watching Tiberius, the swan, and Julius, but Callisto had eyes only for Faelthor, watching her long-lost match with a happy and intrigued stare. A woman in her early 20s, she was beauty incarnate. Her brown hair cascaded down to her back, a single braid in the middle. She was dressed in a cream-colored dress with a golden bracelet on each arm. She could have been clad in steel plate, and yet her luxurious figure would not have been disrupted. Something moved in the corner of her eyes, and she looked back. An old man in a black and purple toga was sitting in a chair, looking blindly up at her. Spying is the first step on the road to politics, he said, his voice so feeble it was hoarse. What a prince you would have made. Callisto laughed. Grandfather, she cooed to him, smiling. She let the curtain fall and walked over to him. She was the heir apparent despite her position in the family, and it was clear in her walk, both seductive and affirmative. It was not to be her fate, however. She had an older sister, and her brother Julius, being the only son of Alistair, was the heir to Seaward. You should be in bed. I may be old and blind, Alexis said, his milky white eyes staring vaguely into her stomach. But if you think I'm going to lay in bed while my favourite grandchild is married off to some poxy. Careful, grandfather, Callisto laughed. You might hurt yourself. I'm stronger than I look, Alexis grunted. She took his hands, and he tried to wrestle them out of her grip, but feeble as he was no match for her. I once battled a Corsair invasion of over 50 ships. When you were my age, Callisto laughed. Come on, before the healer finds you out of bed. I am still the Prince of Seaward, Alexis protested. He pulled himself laboriously to his creaking feet. Let us see if there are any men of worth for your sister down there. Let us see if can find some honest men. Fine, but no longer than necessary, Callisto gave in. She could never argue with her grandfather. She knew finding a suitor for her older sister was futile, but there was no telling Alexis that. And then you go back to bed. Very well, Alexis smiled, looking out vaguely into the distance. Take my arm and let us pretend you are the loving daughter I never had. Callisto smiled, looking over to her handmaid for help. I will always be your beloved granddaughter. She and the handmaid took his arms and helped him down the stairs. It was a long walk, Callisto taking one step for every 10 of Alexis's. But finally they made it. It took the men in the hall a few moments to realize they were there, but a knight under Julius's charge suddenly sang out, All hail Alexis, the Prince of Seaward. Hail! The room exploded out in a single cheer. Even the Horselanders and Romans cheered. Oh, do not mind me, Alexis smiled vaguely, as he hobbled down the last flight of stairs into the hall, leaving Callisto behind. I'm just an old man in a world of young ones. He walked blindly through the hall. Go back to your debauchery. I promise my heart won't give out at what I hear. There was an uncertain laugh around the hall, and then gradually, the feast returned to what it had been. Father, Alistair stood up, his face full of pride. Ignoring the healers again, I see. If there is one thing I have learned in my old age, my son, Alexis said, resting against a pillar, it's never do what healers tell you. Mistner laughed. Well, if it means I live to be as old as you, my prince, then those are words to live by. Come, my friend, Faelthor offered Alexis his arm and seat. My son, Alexis exclaimed, after feeling the general's hand. He let himself fall into the seat. How are you, Faelthor? He wasn't a relative of Faelthor, but his closeness to Alistair had made him like a son to Alexis. Not nearly as drunk as I should be, Faelthor said. A feeling I know well, Alexis sighed as he sat down. He breathed heavily for a moment, and Callisto brought him a glass of water. Thank you, my dear. He examined her vaguely for a moment. So where exactly are those great-grandchildren I'm waiting for? Alistair choked on his drink. Wait, what? These two, Alexis nodded in Faelthor's general direction. Why haven't they started making my new heirs? Faelthor laughed awkwardly, chancing a glance at Callisto. She simply shook her head. Alexis was having a forgetful moment, it seemed. Impotency has that effect on people, I'm afraid. And that is the only reason I am sure. Alistair raised an eyebrow, disapproving of the looks Faelthor and Callisto were giving each other. "Aside from the fact I'm getting married tomorrow," Callisto said. "And that your betrothed is watching us," Alistair pointed out, jerking his head at the other side of the hall, where the lords of the stewards were in council. "At least Ignatius and his son are getting along again," Misnir pointed out. He was right. This was an important point. Ever since the trial of Faelthor, a year past, the steward had had no contact with his son, and many of Alistair's supporters feared for Decimus's life from his father's wrath. "I wish I could find solace in that," Faelthor said. "If Ignatius has decided to put aside his hatred for his son, it must mean he is planning something that he needs his son's support for." "And when he marries me," Callisto agreed, "then he will have a portion of your power." She looked at Alistair. "It may simply be that Ignatius is attempting to take power away from our cause." "Maybe." Faelthor took up his drink. "Let's go ask." He didn't wait for Alistair's response and stood up, offering Callisto his arm. She took it with an exasperated shake of her head, and they proceeded over to the lords of the stewards. "General," Decimus exclaimed at his approach. The wine had loosened him up considerably. "My lord," Faelthor smiled. They embraced as brothers and patted each other on the back. "General," Ignatius repeated his son, but there was no hint of merriment. "My lord Ignatius," Faelthor bowed. "My lord Aquila." Aquila bowed and smiled, a courtesy that Ignatius did not show. "We heard you ran into trouble on the coastal road," Aquila said. "I trust your men made it through unscathed." "Many of my men were slain by the pirates," Faelthor sighed. "Several are in extensive care at Pharos." "Let us not talk of such miserable talk," Callisto rolled her eyes. "It is my wedding tomorrow." "Indeed," Decimus said, taking her arm and planting something that resembled a kiss on her cheek. "I see you two have met." "Lady Callisto and I have been close friends for many years," Faelthor nodded. "When my lord Alexis took me in to be tutored at the Seaward Academy, we grew very close." "Not too close, I hope," Decimus jested. "Yes," Ignatius said. Once again, his mood was the opposite of his son's. "We don't want anyone getting the wrong idea." "Indeed," Aquila sighed pointedly. "It's not like we have other things to worry about." Faelthor looked at him. Something was eating away at his insides. "I will leave you," Ignatius said to Decimus and his bride. "I grow tired of company." "We should speak with Alistair about any last-minute changes to the wedding plans," Aquila declared. "I will," Ignatius promised. "You stay here. One of us might as well enjoy ourselves." He departed, throwing his cup vaguely to a serving boy. His citadel guardsmen made to escort him, but he pushed them away and left them behind. "Miserable wretch, isn't he?" Callisto said. "You'll get used to him," Decimus said. "He's just old, corrupt, uncaring, pessimistic, and grumpy," Callisto suggested. Decimus considered this. "Yes," he agreed. "Anything else?" "I have pages more upstairs," Callisto smiled. "I'm sure you do," Decimus said. "I would like to take time to see your scholarly work." "Not until our vows have been made," Callisto teased, holding up a hand and pushing him away. It didn't require much effort on her part. "Very well," Decimus sighed sadly. "Now, my lady, do you drink wine?" "When I need to." "Well, thankfully for me, you do need to tonight." And they left to get new drinks. Callisto nodded to Faelthor as she departed, her objectives apparent to her. "Ah, to be young and in love," Faelthor smiled, watching them leave. "If that's what love looks like, then it's no wonder why men like gold." Aquila grimaced. His nostrils flared as if he was smelling something foul. You've never been in love, my lord. Faelthor straightened up and rested against a pillar. Oh, I have been. Aquila grimaced again as he adjusted his mouth. He licked his teeth and inclined his head briefly. But her price is more than I can afford, and her father will not barter. Faelthor laughed. You don't get along. I was his ward during my childhood. Aquila's eyes had gone glassy. His mind was far away. His sons taught me combat and leadership. His daughter taught me the beauty of things. Especially her, he smiled. We would steal away from her father's house into the wind and spend our nights under the stars and listen to the wild around us. And now you are the right hand to the leader of the stewards, Faelthor smiled. Her father must be impressed by now. One would think. He told me he would never let her daughter marry anyone save thee. He cut himself off quickly. Well, anyone of proper importance. More important than your station already? Yes. What I need is to prove myself in battle, and prove I am worthy in both mind and metal. A military success, Faelthor offered. You may find those only last as long as your momentum. I am young, Aquila smiled. I have lots of that. It was true. Aquila had not a grey hair on his head and seemed to have an energy to rival any young opponent. Well, momentum or no, war is no road to walk without friends. Perhaps I could help you with your problem. I would welcome your help, Aquila sighed. He looked around slightly for Ignatius. He was nowhere to be seen. I originally thought you were an enemy to my goals, but I feel you have the right approach. Faelthor jerked his head to indicate they should walk together. Aquila narrowed his eyes and then agreed by standing up. What was your original plan? Work in the political arena. Aquila took another drink from a passing serving boy. Gain the attention of the leaders in the kingdom and work my way into the position that would satisfy my lady. And how is that working out? Terribly. Aquila downed his entire tankard. In the moment it took him to speak again, Faelthor thought back on everything he knew about the man in front of him. Out of nowhere, he had arrived in the hall with a witness, writ from Richard, establishing him as the representative of Horseland. He had been immediately granted a seat at court, and he had masterfully manipulated his way to become his closest advisor in little under half a year. He was suddenly at Ignatius's side in all matters, despite the fact that everything he had was from Ignatius himself. Finally, Aquila came out from behind his tankard. He tossed it frustratedly. It clattered loudly against the stone, but no one paid it any mind. My lord Ignatius listens to my counsel when it works against his rivals in the kingdom. That is all he sees. He barely saw the threat of the Golden King, but, fortunately, the citadel overruled his decision. It destroyed all the progress I had made in the political stage. I began to work my way back by playing to his egotism and pledging him support in destroying his enemies, mostly you. At every opportunity, I've been attempting to elicit his support to engage the pirate threat on the coast. I was able to convince him to come to the wedding, hoping he could see the destruction at first hand. But nothing. Aquila shook his head. We went by ship, a very big and well-armed ship, so the journey here was as uneventful as it was long. We hope to change that, Faelthor began his sales talk. The other lords of the citadel and I are working together to put an end to Ignatius's power-hungry policies. We have a very real enemy massing against us, and Ignatius's policies will destroy us. Aquila didn't like the sound of that. He sighed deeply. You mistake me for a traitor, sir. Is it treason to see the enemy on the outside as well as in? Faelthor smirked. I see a shadow lying on the horizon instead of the sun. I see us fighting amongst ourselves with an enemy on all four sides of the kingdom of Rome, and there is a word for that, my lord. Surrounded, our northern colonies are dead, the might of our military is gone. All eyes watch us hungrily. There will be no help for us here. We are on our own. We need strong leadership. I feel there will be no higher place for a man in need of gaining position for his lost lady. These words impacted on Aquila deeply. Ignatius means to move against your plans to make him see the threat of the South. It was a hard thing to admit that, and he looked none too happy with himself. I know, Faelthor smiled reassuringly. You do? This is what it is to be a lord in the kingdom. Faelthor placed a reassured hand on Aquila's shoulder. Join us, and our power will be your power. We can help you. I only ask that you hear us out. Aquila nodded. I will. I was perhaps wrong to work against you. May I seek your forgiveness? Working against me was the best thing you did since you entered the citadel. Faelthor smiled. There is nothing to forgive. You are in a position that none of us are. Your actions will save us in ways like no other. Thank you, my lord. When do we begin? After the wedding, Faelthor smiled at Aquila's enthusiasm wearily. I feel we're all a bit too drunk to discuss politics. Aquila raised an eyebrow and inclined his head towards the table Turgon was sitting at. He was arguing with a man on which women were easier to seduce, Seaward or the capital. The discussion quickly turned to violence. I suppose that depends on your definition of politics. Faelthor laughed, and they toasted their new friendship.